Well, good morning, Ms. Pennington.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us for the live interview and for taking the time to do this. Um, just to clarify, you're not Clinton Huggins.
No, that is my son, so I'm using his college Zoom.
All right.
I don't Zoom much. I do use Teams a lot.
So why don't we start with where you were born and when?
I was born in 1977 in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a native of Florida, raised in the Switzerland area. Most people know that out in Fruit Cove on the St. Johns River. And I came to this area in the fourth grade.
What day were you born?
Oh, October 29th, 1977.
So you've been in Florida most of your life or all of your life?
All of my life, I did spend a year with my husband, who's from, well, he's passed away, but he was from Richmond, Virginia. So I did spend a year of my life with him up there. But for the most part, I've been here in Flagler County.
And in other words, from your childhood, you spent your childhood in Flagler?
Yeah, my first year of school was at Wadsworth, and I believe that was the first year they opened
Hmm.
the doors at Wadsworth. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time in Flagler. I was there, a private school, but yes,
And I'm sorry. Is that
that's
nothing?
okay. I think the cat wants to interview me.
So, mm, um, what's been your professions up until your
Um,
action?
yeah. So I actually have been nearly 30 years now in the banking industry. I started out as a due diligence auditor. I've done that for Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch. Also was an internal investigator for JP Morgan Chase, and I currently work as a fraud strategist for a large Canadian firm.
What is a due diligence officer?
So we built mortgage-backed securities. You actually review what we call like a paper packaging of all your mortgages are secured by investors. So that's who actually supports how you get funding. So what we do is we bundle those, make sure that they're going to be performing loans and for the investor, whoever the investor is. So we review all the documentation, ensure it's in alignment with what the investor would like to invest in.
You're still working other than the county commission?
I do, yes, yes. I'm a fraud strategist. So I work for a large Canadian bank, and I help them with very complicated lending fraud matters.
Of course, this is the Republican primary, so you're a registered Republican,
Yes.
and you've always been a Republican.
Lifelong Republican.
This is you're running for your second term. So, what justifies your reelection?
Yeah, so I feel like our first term has been highly successful, particularly for the Western District. We've been able to deal with some serious drainage issues, get funding from COVID money for that. I've brought a special needs shelter out to that district. We've been able to get state funding for that, as well as Bull Creek. Bull Creek was destroyed in the last hurricane. And the residents really wanted to see that back, so we were able to do that. We've done a lot of conservation work and efforts out in the western expansion, and so now we are prioritizing trying to help them get some long needs on the roads. We have roughly 125 to 130 miles of unpaved road. So that's like a chief priority that I've been working on. So that's been very important to me. And then continuing on the conservation efforts is important, especially with all the growth that we're experiencing. And I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but obviously finding permanent funding mechanisms for beach continue to be a priority.
What is the special needs shelter you're referring to?
So, when I first came on at the county, we had obviously growth was incredible, and we had a deficit for special needs shelter. That is a shelter during any types of storms or crises that we're having, where people can go and stay instead of in their home when they're in need of evacuating and they have issues or they have pets. We obviously had a deficit in that because there are so many residents coming on. We also use schools only for special needs, and that was always kind of putting out on the schools because they would have to close down earlier to set up for it. So all those things combined were an issue for the county, and we were going to have to, per state mandate, at some point address that and build a building So I actually worked with Jonathan Lord on this project to get a building, to get 10 million in funding from actually Senator Leak and Paul Renner helped on that out of the state so that we could build that. And it's actually the first shelter too in the westward side of the county because there are obviously no schools over there. So we were able to work on that. And when it is not in use as a special needs shelter, it will be used as a fair expo hall where people can lease it to have any kind. It's 16,000 square feet, so it's very large. It has kitchen, it has showers, it has laundry. So it'll be used as our new cattlemen's hall for our cattlemen. So it has a multi-use facility to it, but it's a very nice, and I believe it opens maybe in a couple of weeks. So it'll be open in just a few weeks from now.
That's at the county fairgrounds.
It is. It's at the county
So
fairgrounds.
does that preclude any need for using schools anymore during
It
emergencies
will, yes.
entirely?
Well, unless there's more people than we can accommodate at that facility, yes, it would. We'd be able to open it up earlier, get it ready earlier, get the people in sooner than they've been able to, and keep children going to school until the event occurs.
As far as your performance on the county commission, what would you say is a character flaw?
Oh, I think I think I had this flaw. I have this flaw in general in life. So I'm highly empathetic. I have, I can be at times very emotionally charged. I feel for people when they come up and talk to us. Um,
But you know that's not a flaw.
Well, okay, it is in government, I think, because
How
you're trying
so?
to make a very policy-driven, fact-based, fair decision. And obviously, and you've seen this covering us for years, and you're trying to make a decision that doesn't land us in more issues such as lawsuits, regulatory trouble. So it can be very difficult because you want to go one way, obviously, because you can sympathize with the person that is having the issue. But we have to be very fact-based and ensure that we're not going to be wasting additional tax dollars in the long run with things like lawsuits. So that can be very challenging for me.
Is there a procedural flaw that you can think of in terms of how you relate to your colleagues?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems we have on our board obviously is consensus building. And I think that's just always, I'm going to assume probably a problem for all boards at some point or another. So, we've struggled with consensus building or prioritizing what the right issues are. We all have different issues that we'd like to see addressed. So we can get caught up in that at times, and I'm certainly guilty of that.
But it's not necessarily all boards. For instance, in Flagler Beach, they work very well despite all of their deep-seated differences between them. They seem to work very well in toward consensus, but not so much at the county commission. What do you think is the difference? What makes the difference in terms of a board that has more difficulties getting
I
to
I
consensus?
think it's decisions. Well, first of all, I think that's ebb and flow. So I think that all boards do at some point experience. You'll have good years, you'll have quiet
Right.
years, you'll have
Yes.
years where it's peck and mom, just craziness. I believe that's every board. I follow St. John's really well. I follow Volusia. I see it there. There are strong personalities on every board, and I think what we're seeing right now is we're seeing on our board in particular new commissioners trying to figure out the lay of the land, trying to understand, come into complex issues years later, trying to pick up where the last person left off. And then they were elected, right, by people who want change. People want change. You'd be very surprised when they're going to the booth and voting you in. It's the last thing they say before they walk in the door, fix it, change it, make it different. And so you have this a lot of what's the best way to say it? You carry a lot of feelings that, this is really important that you get this right, that you change things, that you change the way everything's ran. So you come in there and you're like a bull in a china shop, you want to fix this, you want to change this. And then it quickly becomes very frustrating because you find well, there's a reason I can't change that, or there's a reason that it's never been done, or there's not funding for it, or the staff is adamantly against it and it becomes a battle with the staff, or you don't have consensus on the board. And so we're seeing all of that right now come to life and a lot of frustration, different types of personalities. Some are very procedural on our board. They want to follow processes. They want to slow things down. They want to look at things. Some people are like, we change it today. Let's get a consensus for it. And so there's just a lot of that going on. And I think, that's probably the most difficult thing we struggle with, and we've got to learn to lead around personalities.
What
Just
is the quality that you bring to the board that gets you to that?
Yeah, I think I hope when you're watching it that you'll find that I try very hard to just take to I've kind of pulled the gavel out if you've seen me as a chair. It's just no, 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 we're not going down these avenues. We just need to be consensus building at all times in the most polite manner that we can. When we're not polite, we're going to get absolutely nothing accomplished for the people of Flagler. So I find myself a lot of times just when someone tries to go down the path of not being respectful or polite to their co-part, then I just shut it down. It's not benefiting any of us up there. And so I feel like we've turned a page in the last couple of months. I really do. I can tell. We kind of were spinning wheels there the first year. We had new commissioners on, and they're good people. Everyone is there for the right reasons on that board, but just competing ideologies is what's happening there. And
Just to be clear, so that the
yeah,
listeners and readers, we don't just assume that they know, the new commissioners were Pam Richardson and Kim Carney, and
right.
the veterans were yourself. You're finishing your first term. There was Andy Dance, who's already into, I think, his second or third term, and then Greg Hansen, who's been there since the 19th century. So, and he's leaving at the end of this term. He's chosen not to run again.
Yes.
So, who, not just on this commission, but in all local governments, local government boards, who do you admire most, or you consider a model of leadership?
There's a couple of them, but I think school board member Lauren Ramirez stands out the most to me right now. I find Lauren is not driven by conflict or the need for attention. I think Lauren is there for all the right reasons in that role. I think she has a desire to serve parents and our constituents, and I think she does an outstanding job. And she really presents herself very well in any public situation. And she's stood up to a lot of stuff on that board, I think, and she's taken it with such grace. And so I'd have to say it was Lauren Ramirez.
Um, can you give your commission a grade for the last couple of years?
Yeah. Um, to give us a grade, I'd say we're probably a B to B minus, to be honest with you right now. We're going through I've you said, two new commissioners. We're going through administration change right now. But we've been very collaborative in supporting things that are very important, such as public safety. We strengthened our county reserves. We paid off years old debt. So we've been very consistent with making sure that we are taking care of our finances. We've recently started to advance some major road and drainage projects, which I'm really glad to see being done. And we've approved a lot of conservation, which is amazing for us. So,
You've
so
mentioned the second half of of what was going to be the question, which was some of the parts where you've excelled. But the other part of this is, can you give a couple of examples where you failed? Oh, I don't mean to use the word so harshly, but a couple of examples where
yeah.
it goes to have lowered your grade. Where have you
I,
not
I
worked
think
hard?
that we have lacked consistency and prioritization. What is a priority this week seems to fall off the board 2 weeks from now when we're dealing with another crisis. I've said it several times. If the beach is the main priority for the board because of what we're dealing with out there in terms of erosion and property destruction, then the board has to keep very consistent when we're looking at funding other things, capital projects, whatever, and say, does this really align with our number one priority? I think we could do a better job at prioritizing new road paving in the residential areas. That's obviously not been a priority for a very long time. So when we get revenue or funding that we're going to expend, we really need to go back to our priority, our chief priority. We don't have infinite amounts of funding. So I've seen us, and I've brought it up. I've seen Mr. Dance bring it up, but just lose the vote when there's funding there. Are we putting it towards what we're saying is the most important thing, you know?
Along those lines, when we ran the story about Bull Creek, a lot of criticism
Yes.
online was that, well, you're misspending this money. We could use it in better places, and we didn't really need this. And the type of money that was spent was, if you went after this grant, it should have been directed at something more essential. How would you address that?
Oh, okay, so Bull Creek is an anomaly to all of this. First of all, just to give people who are new to the county some insight, we are one of the larger agricultural farming counties in this area. We produce a lot of potato for Frito-Lay. We produce, I think we're the largest cabbage producer in the United States. So we have a lot of farming going on out there. We don't have a lot of hardly any commercial, certainly no restaurants. When the county acquired that piece of property, it was a restaurant. It was intended to stay a restaurant, and it was destroyed. It was where all the farmers met for lunch. It was where all the farmers got their breakfast. It was really a pillar in that community. So when the county acquired it, it was certainly one very important to Western Flagler. It's an identity piece for them, right? So it was destroyed, and there was no funding to put back. We were going to plug like $300,000, maybe build some sort of like container, a shack sort of, to have some type of food out there. What happened was in that particular situation was there happened to be funds already at the county from the state of Florida for a project. And I think it was in Marineland area. And the state of Florida later on decided that no, the funds could not be used in that project. Please send the funds back unless you have a place where you can use it. And it was very specific. It was specific to economic loss. It was specific to hurricane. And they looked around, they looked at every project they had and said, we don't want to send the money back because we know when we send money back to Tallahassee, it goes right back out the door to another county. It's just the way it works. So we looked at every project and they certainly tried to find all sorts of projects where it could be applied. But it turned out that was the only project that rose to the level of that grant issue. So rather than send it back, the state said, keep it and rebuild Bull Creek. And so that's what we did. So that's an anomaly, but it is so welcomed. And I think it's really important to keep people content out west. They certainly get the least of our tax dollars, but they are keeping us rural, they are keeping us fed. And so I highly support where that went to. And I think over time, people who come out and enjoy Bull Creek will love it. And because it was always important in that community and a staple. So hopefully people will come out and partake in it and enjoy it.
Are there a couple of goals that you've agreed to as a county commission that you are very supportive of, and maybe a couple of goals that you might not have yourself supported, but you went along with?
Yeah. So I think one thing the board gets right is that we always prioritize public safety. That includes fire, EMS, emergency management. We often forget that one. So that's a really nice thing that we don't differ too much on that. We also don't differ on what protecting natural resources and purchasing raising the funds and purchasing all of the conservation land. So that's very nice not to have competing goals there. I think we vary some with infrastructure spending. I would like to see a residential road paving program and stick to it, even if it's one a year, just to give some realistic expectations to people who have lived on dirt roads, who don't want to be on dirt roads, who are having flooding issues because of the dirt road. Um, we owe some commitment there. I don't think we all align on that, particularly because we get kind of sucked up in the other issues. The other thing
But
I
is money one of the reasons you also don't align because there is no money to do that?
A lot of times, right. So once, I don't think people understand what taxes because they say, oh, my taxes, my taxes. Um, the county, when we receive taxes, the bulk majority of them go completely to constitutional officers. That's your sheriff's office, that's your tax collector, the property assessor, clerk of courts, supervisor of elections. So then we fund things, medical examiner, all sorts of things, issues in court and stuff. by the time we get down to what is left, there's only, a small amount to work with for the year in comparison to what these the bids are coming in at, right? I mean, these are incredible amounts to overcome. And then you've got the beach, which is one of the higher priorities, but the costs are almost out of line with what we can afford at times. And then so it's very competitive with infrastructure needs after that. It's like, well, there's X amount and road paving is coming in 1 to 2 million a mile in bids. So that's very difficult. 1 to 2 million a mile is a big chunk of money for them to look at. And then by the time we get money for the roads, we're now looking at repaving collector roads, right? We got to repave 304, we've got to repave 205. So it makes things very difficult, at that point, to say, okay, let's prioritize roads that have never been paved, right? So that's been very difficult. But I think at some point we just have to say, no, roads that haven't been paved, we've got to have something set up. We've got to be doing at least 1 year of one road a year. There has to be something there. So I think that's something that we haven't talked enough about, is long neglected residential. The other one we've talked about, but I feel like we haven't pushed hard enough on, is is sort of advocating at the state level more harder, working harder and smarter on this, maybe doing it all year long, and that is helping FGUA expand water down in the US 1 corridor in the south. That's the Ormond Favoretta area on US 1. What we've seen in Palm Coast is IT&T kind of developed along 95. They developed now along US 1, Palm Coast has, and it's left very few commercial pad ready areas. And so when it comes to unincorporated county creating economic jobs and things like that, there's not a whole lot within our sphere of unincorporated that's commercial pad ready. We look at the US 1 corridor in the south, and you'll see buildings on it, but they're on septic. It's kind of important that we try to get water down that corridor, because by getting water down that corridor, we're opening up US 1 property where we can
Right.
see industrial and commercial come in.
So
And it's a really attractive area for that kind of business because they can also tap into the Daytona Beach Ormond market, right? The folks that they're needing to fulfill these roles. We don't necessarily have as many people for them to look at as that. So I think that needs to be discussed again by our board and reprioritizing, because until we fix our tax base, we're just going to continue to have these conversations about infrastructure and
F-
priority and cost.
FGUA is the utility that is sort of, it's not exactly a government utility, but it
No,
comes in and uh,
we
but it's there for Plantation Bay, but it's not likely to say, all right, yes, we're going to take care of that for you down US 1.
They did. So they did say that we did try to help them. So we actually took this to Tom Leak, and we've taken it up to Tallahassee twice. It's a large expense. They're not in the mindset to fund it through legislatively through appropriations. So they have applied for grants, and so we just continue to try to support them through that process to try to get the grants to do it. So there isn't a want to help expand. Obviously, you go down that area, it needs water long term, and so we're just hoping that sooner than later when it comes, so that we can. And then at that point, you have property that is in unincorporated. It's not in the city of Bunnell. It's not in city of Palm Coast. It's unlikely to annex into any of that, hopefully. And then that is where the board can really kind of control and say, no, no residential housing. This needs to be commercial, industrial. There's no housing around it. It's got water, that's where our board could really probably try to
Well,
focus in on it.
why not partner with Benel Utility in the same way that the county or Flagler Beach or the Hammock have partnered with Palm Coast, in some cases, not necessarily forcing the partnership to lead to annexation.
Yeah, I don't think they have capacity to do it. If they're certainly interested in it, we could talk. But that is part of what I'm saying. We need to prioritize and have those discussions, right? If we know we have a tax-based problem because we're primarily residential, and we know that we're missing commercial pad ready, and people are really coming at us and going, create more job, create more of this, get the economy going here, and you're going, well. I'm trying, we build an IDA, we've tried to give economic incentives, they're not coming. And you're like, well, let's look at the issues why they're not coming, and I can't get past census issues like the money's not here or the right type of people to work are not here. But what we can do is give them commercial pad areas in areas closer to where the money is or where the workers are, that still remains in our county and would help us diversify our tax base. So that's got to be the priority. And whether it comes through FGUA or it comes through Bunnell, the board needs to start having those conversations and bring that project back to life.
I was going to ask you what a couple of your goals for the coming 4 years are, and would this be one of them?
This to me needs to be when we talk about top priorities that are not necessarily funded by the county, but that is going to change our county for the better. This certainly is it. One of my very simple goals also would be to set a goal to prioritize and pave um, one residential street a year. It sounds crazy, just one, but we're 125 miles of unpaved roads. Some people don't want their roads paved, and that's understandable and fine. But there are many people who want their roads paved because of the flooding issues that they experience on the roadways.
And
So
have
that's
you
one of my
figured
big.
out a source of money for that?
That is, well, that's what we're having that conversation with our board this year. We have got to start talking about prioritization, efficiency within roles within government. So this is something we need to talk about as board, time study of government roles. Um, is there a way we can do that and look at what people are doing? Is there a way we can do, we don't hire back through attrition, not necessarily layoffs, but is there a way that we can do that so we can start freeing up funding without, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a little bit, without taxes increasing, because right now nobody in the public seems to want their taxes to
Without
increase.
taxes increasing? Well, am I correct? Your general fund is about $116 million,
Yeah, that's correct.
and about half, or a little bit more than half, goes to the constitutionals.
That's correct.
And of that half that goes to the constitutional, a good share of that goes to the sheriff. It's law enforcement. So the what remains in your half of the general fund, the largest share goes to fire rescue, right?
That's correct.
Which is
Yes.
also public
Right.
safety, which if the amendment were to pass, you supposedly cannot touch. You have to still fund all of those elements, which then disproportionately leads to a disproportionate need to cut in the remaining basically third of that pot of money that you have left. Um, so with that in mind, how will you vote on the amendment?
Yeah, so I'm waiting to read the amendment. Obviously, we've read what they've put out there, but I think there's a lot of lawsuits that are going to change the way it's written. I've seen where they're talking about taking it back to the Attorney General to rewrite it before it goes on. So I have to see that. I know that I know that this amendment will bring tax shifts. I do recognize that. So all in all, though, I think I right now intend to probably vote yes, and I know that seems controversial, but
Contradictory is more
think so.
is
Now, I think I mean, you have to look at your situation. I mean, first of all, I became a widow this past year. And I think, a lot of people are just not, they're looking for tax relief. And if we're not going to give it to them, if you're not getting it somewhere, and you give them an option like this, they're going to vote yes, not thinking about the consequences. Now, I can recognize that there will probably be tax shifts from this. I think the state fully intended when they put this out there that there would be tax shifting going on. I've heard conversations about state sales tax rising, things like that. So more consumption taxes, MSBUs, TUs. Um, so, I don't know, I look at everyone's situation differently. And so right now I'm leaning towards yes, but I'm waiting to see if they fix a couple of things. And that would really determine how I go.
based on everything that you've said in the first 25 minutes. I don't understand how you're not out there campaigning very loudly against the amendment.
Because, Pierre, first of all, I don't think that's my job is to campaign for or against amendment. I just,
Individually, I don't mean as a representative of the commission, but
yeah,
as a individual
yeah.
commissioner.
I can see though that, so this is just Leann, the resident talking, right? 4 years in this role, I can see where people, staff, people who are consultants, people are who are um, elected leaders, they have a very difficult time having conversations about duplicate expenses, unnecessary rules, growth in administration, you know, broadening tax base, having hard, difficult conversations that will strip away some of the unnecessary uh, item lines, right? You say it all the time, I mean, I think it's one of your questions, is, well, the sheriff gets X amount of dollars, how do you say enough's enough? Like everybody doesn't want to have these conversations because they lead to difficult choices. Adult daycare was one of those, right? So one of the things that whether we like it or not, the conversation around homestead property tax and voting for this amendment forces governments, local governments, to have these conversations to say, okay, we always knew this might happen, right? I mean, it could happen because the market collapses. It could happen for a million different other reasons besides voting in this amendment. But you're like, okay, we're going to have these difficult conversations. You may not like it, but we may not need six administrative assistants any longer. We may need to merge communications or permitting with other municipalities. We may need not to, as a municipality, to have our own fire and rescue. We may need to go with the county as a choice. It doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, they need to have these conversations no one wants to have. And
I
so
don't
there's,
think anybody would disagree with you that we need to
but
have
I
those
feel like we
conversations.
can't, we try to have these conversations. No one's willing to have them because the revenue is still there. And so if that's what this is going to take, then that's where we're headed. Because, and this is not just a Flagler County thing, this is government everywhere, right?
Yeah.
This is government everywhere. It's like, it's too big, it's too expensive. And you're like, gosh, if I had that access to billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, what are they doing with it at the federal level? What are they doing at, you know, I think, and I don't want to bring up the word Doge, but like nobody wants to have the difficult conversation. So if this is one of those ways where you're like, hey, we need to do time studies, are these roles really necessary? Then that's what we need to start doing. And
Well,
that might be, this is a painful way to get there. And I know absolutely what will happen with a bill like this, which is you're still not going to be able to fund all these issues, particularly when you take away this much revenue. So immediately, all these governments will go back to the let me pass MSTUs, let me pass MSBUs, let me add on certain fees, let me get creative with all of this. And I think that's where you got to say, if you have a very strong board, no, we need to have these difficult conversations about duplicative expenses, consulting contracts, delaying capital purchases. And we're almost forced to do that with this amendment. So there's this part of me that says yes, because then it forces not two, not one. It forces all five of you to have that conversation
I,
all around all the municipalities.
and I don't disagree with pretty much everything you said here, and I appreciate that you didn't bring up the fraud of Doge, which has been an idiocy, thrust upon local governments. But the
Yeah.
thing is, the way you're describing things is basically saying that we, as a county commission, have not had the fortitude to force these conversations, so we're punting to the state and this amendment. But it is in your hands.
I don't think it's the county commission. I think it's the people. I think it's the people and maybe the state level punting to that. It's what was missed about what Blaze and Golia, or however you say his name, what was missed in the entire conversation with Ron DeSantis and everything was it can't continue to grow at this rate, the costs, because you're obviously you're limited on what you can even charge in taxes. You're capped, right? Your growth could become stagnant. Value, so the way our whole process goes with the collecting could go lower, but you can't keep up at this rate
But
because
I'm
I think
reluctant to let that be the premise because even from your perspective at the commission, you've spoken about this. Ms. Carney has spoken about this. Others have. The sheriff certainly has. Their premise is false. Their premise is completely flawed, and it has never been substantiated, no matter how much you've tried,
no.
including your county attorney, who has sent a very elaborate, very good five-page single-spaced letter saying, we want all this explanation, and he has not been answered. So we're continuing to set up this claim by the state and by Ingoglia as a valid premise, which it is not. So we can't really
No,
say.
no, no, no. Yeah, I understand that. I can't, I take his concern seriously, but I don't take the calculation seriously. Because you can't label everything above, what is it? Inflation and population as waste. You just can't. They didn't say these are your wasteful items, these are your fraudulent purchases. These are your he never came back to us with anything specific. So on that front, no. Um, because he didn't factor in the fact that we had almost been a fiscally constrained broke county prior to 2019. We had no reserves. We now have healthy reserves. We paid off debt. He didn't factor any of that in, right? But I think the point is like at some point, like if you keep on this trajectory, you're going to be, taxing everywhere, right? But how do you break the machine down of how do you stop it? How do you say, hey, these bids are incredibly high? Like how much money are you making off of this? How much like, at what point do you stop? How do you stop this big mechanism from continuing to try to generate taxes, these projects from getting out of hand, costly, expensive? And I think like the intent was to do good with that amendment. I don't think it's is it the healthiest way? I don't think it was written properly and they didn't take into consideration some of the fiscally constrained counties. How will they function? How will a county like Flagler County function? But when I say how I intend to vote, I have been reading the lawsuits, and I think if some of these questions I have get answered and fixed, then it possibly could be a yes on that. And I
Any
think
point?
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, finish your thought. It possibly could
Well,
be a yes.
it could. They could fix that. I think when they had talked about setting up a trust in the state to help send back revenue into the counties to pay for law enforcement, so that's a large chunk of our funding, things like that. Then they could fix some of this and give relief. People do need relief. You may see I'm fine, you're fine. But you and I both know cereal's $8 in the grocery store. They can't stop the cereal maker from getting $8. So people are looking for whatever way I can cut. So if they're giving me the opportunity to cut my property taxes, then let them deal with it because people believe, just what I was talking about, that we're growing rapidly, we're using funding for unprioritized items. They want to see you do the exercise about duplicative services. I get it every day. People come to me, why do we have two fire departments? Why do we have this? Um, it's not perfect, but you can certainly see what their overall the message is, which is stop growing unnecessarily.
Let's get to the unnecessary.
Yeah.
The second part of the question, of course, is how do you make up the loss? But part
Mhm.
of that question has to be, in your view, because of the way you're describing things, do you think there is a loss to be made up? Because you're basically
There
a
will
lot of
be.
what you're saying is, well, we may not need to make up because there's too much waste. Well, along those lines, what are a couple of examples that you can point to in your government that is waste? I don't think you would even call adult education waste. You call the way you
Oh, I
took
don't.
it when you
Yeah.
cut it wasn't so much wasteful as it was we're not getting enough back for the amount that we're putting out. It
Are you
was
talking about not adult education, but
I'm
adult
sorry.
daycare?
That's right. Adult daycare.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. No, no,
So,
you were looking at it. Yeah. It's the return on the investment too. Does
right,
the tax dollar being put out benefit a large majority?
right.
And that it was an instance where it was like, no, it doesn't because you're only seeing 10 to 20 people a week. The program's costing us maybe $3,000 to $4,000 a month per person, and it benefits very few. So you're like, this program doesn't make sense. I'd rather see that funding go somewhere to where it makes sense, right? When I talk about roads, that's a half mile of road that could have been paved, right, every year to get us caught up. So it's important to the people that use that program. It's important to know that that program's there. Unfortunately, I don't think Flagler County is in a position where they can offer these types of programs yet because of the way the tax revenue comes in, because of the way because of the limit of tax revenue. And because of the cost of services are going up so much, it becomes a program that no longer works.
And you, as a commission, decided not to go with the private-public partnership that was proposed.
Not yet. No. In fact, that's still in the works. There's other companies that have come forward. They want to talk about doing public-private partnership with that building. The building has a specific deed restriction that it has to be used for senior services. So we are looking at that, but that's for services like that, we should always be looking at, um, can we get a nonprofit to run it? Can we partner with a nonprofit? Can we partner with somebody that does this better than us? Or can offer more or cover more people in our community?
So a
Or
couple of examples of actual waste in your government.
Mhm.
Are there?
I think I'm going to talk about every municipality in general. I think we
Well,
have to.
no, I'd like us to stick to the county commission, to what you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think that we need to do some time study work on roles. I think there are departments that are understaffed. I think there are departments that are overstaffed. I think the fleet needs a closer look at. We have really grown the fleet in terms of cars and automobiles that may not necessarily be necessary. Um,
What
I think we
department is
always,
overstaffed?
I'm sorry.
What department is overstaffed?
Without doing time studies, I mean, I think, we have to talk about all the administration areas, the non-essential. I can tell you right now that road and bridge needs more workers. And it's very hard to not see them adding, but seeing other departments, technology, communications, all of that continue to add. So it's very difficult to see the roles that support the public in the general every single day, not having the adequate staff size. And that's for the administrator to do. But these roles are getting expensive and costly. They have pensions. Healthcare is incredibly high. We need the study done. We need to talk about what it costs to hire internally a person versus outsourcing these types of roles because of the simple fact that the pension base and the healthcare base kind of make it,
Hmm.
a very expensive role. And then I think what we have to talk about is you have all these municipalities collecting taxes and yet we offer the same services. Do we need to see some folding of departments or some collaboration in terms of things like communications, HR, permitting, those type of departments where if we're really truly looking out for the taxpayer, right,
Mhm.
then would it be in the best interest of all of us to start having either interlocals or whatever it is to say, you've got five HR people, we have six, I have two, we have nine. Collectively, do we really need that many? Can we come together and compartmentalize that into one department amongst the five municipalities? Same with permitting, same like that. Those are probably studies that have to be done and all of that, but it should be done. I mean, that's how private corporations run all the time. Is they're always looking for efficiency. Is this the smartest, bestest way? What is the most cost-effective way? Do I really need to have this position in-house? Could we get away with outsourcing certain positions? I think it was, I want to say Lake County or one of the other counties. I mean, they're using when you call in, you get a robot basically talking to you at first, things like that. That sounds horrible, right? But you're like, if you're wanting taxes to come down, then we're going to have difficult conversations to get there so that we can free up the funds to do what the people are asking every day, which is protect my property from flooding, pave my dirt road, fix the beach. And you're like, they're not saying, hey, Leann, can you make sure that you add additional people to your non-essential workers? They're not coming to me asking me that. And those people just get costlier and costlier. So people, fleet, all that always has to be done, regardless. So I'm on the county commission or anyone else. you've got to continue, you've got to set up a way to test that and to ensure that your staffing levels are at the proper level.
You're paying half the cost of the SROs, the school resource deputies in schools. I think there's 12 or 13 of them. You're paying half that cost to help the school district. You don't have to do it, but you have been doing it traditionally in this county for many years. Greg Hansen raised that question in one of the last meetings. Andy Dance had raised it a couple of years back. How do you see yourself continuing to pay that cost, which is, I think it's about $1 million. I'm not sure, from the county's end, the county's share.
Oh, one
Uh,
of the things I did this last budget was I actually looked at what they call sister cities or cities with similar populations.
mhm.
So I was able to do that. And I noticed that quite a few counties share that cost with their school boards. So that's not unusual to Flagler County. I think that falls though in the bucket of, hey, that is a priority, that is essential, and that's a necessity. The public is not banging down the door saying, "Don't fund the police, don't fund the police in our schools." If anything, they're telling us to fund more of them. We've had conversations, but this comes back to that question or that discussion we were having. Nobody wants to have the unnecessary conversations about who should fund this, who's responsible to fund this, because they don't want to. We've been doing it. I'm happy to continue to pay for that because that to me is a necessity. How we get there. Same thing with lifeguards. I feel the same way about the lifeguard situation. So I'm okay with doing that. Would it be nice to have $1 million back in our budget for roads? Yes. You know what's nicer? Having sheriff's deputies inside the school system, no matter how it gets paid. So that to me is just a no-brainer right now. If the school board would like to step up and say, we'll take the full cost of it, they're more than
Not
willing
likely.
to, but they're not going to. And
No.
that's the honest truth. So that's a program that you're like, has to be funded. Nobody wants to see it go away. And and so that's what we're doing, right? We're not going to touch that. That's a non, that's not up for now. The school board is always welcome to step in and say, oh, we'll cover our costs.
So Carver Center,
Yes.
here's your opportunity to talk
Sure.
about that because I think obviously you were a little bit under the gun in the last story that ran. But you had brought up at the county commission meeting discussing some of those difficult questions. We need to look at Carver Center. We need to look at our funding. It's about 90 $90,000 is operations that you provide, and then there is 120,000 that you provide in capital improvements. I think utilities or something like this. But anyway, roughly $200,000 combined, right?
And
Uh,
more. And
100
more because we our general services does all the work over there. Staff, they're over there pretty regularly doing a lot of work. Plus we're doing a lot of capital improvements.
Mm.
But it is not a building that the county operates out of. We built a wing onto that building, about a $300,000 project, if I recall. It was like the first year I came in. And now they're looking at paving the parking lot. And again, it comes back to like, it's a difficult discussion to have, but this county's not operating anything out of it. It is fully operated by the school board and PAL has been working out of it. So it's one of those
But it's your building. You own the building.
we do own the building, but that's comes down to it sits in the city of Bunnell. It is utilized primarily by Bunnell residents. PAL, the school board operates the offices out of it every day. So that's one of those conversations that you're like, well, it's important to that community, but can we talk about cost sharing at least on it with the school board because you are operating people out of it. We continue to do all the capital improvement. We continue to use general services over there, and the costs just keep going up. And it's one of those items that have to have the discussion. Whether it comes to the answer of no, we're going to continue to fund it, that's fine. But are we having conversations every single budget season with where can they do better with their budget? Where can they help us out with their budget? PAL is in there now operating out it. Can they help us, more?
As I
Can
understand it, PAL is not paying anything for the
Right.
use of the building, right? Isn't that a little odd?
Well, I think that's exactly where my point is. Powell went in to see if it would work in that community, right? There was not a decision whether or not, a firm decision of how long they would last in there. It was more
Aren't
of
they looking for their own place?
I haven't heard that in years, so I don't know.
And
Um,
also there is the workforce office upstairs at Carver. I was told by Miss Robinson, who runs the center, that they're not paying rent.
right.
Why would they not?
Well, that's exactly was my point, Pierre. Like, let's have conversations with the people who were utilizing that space
Mhm.
and say, what are you doing for, are you able to help? Are you able to assist? Are you able to use school board maintenance to take care of the building? Is the school board able to fund the capital improvement projects from here on out? You know what I mean? Or are they able to cost share in that? That's a conversation that's perfect area where it's perfectly normal that people are going to ask those questions and we need to be asking those questions to see it's really it's negotiation, right? And so the county's glad that they can support Carver Gym, but when we are looking at potential deficits, when we're looking at a beach that needs to be funded, when we're talking about we need to prioritize flooding problems, we need to free up money for that. That's exactly where we're limited in where we can go and look for this kind of money to free up. So that's one of those where we're just trying to have the conversation. And if it comes down to, hey, the county wants the majority of the board wants to fund it, then it's just going to continue to be funded. But we're asking the city of Benel, we're asking PAL, we're asking the job resource place, we're asking the school board, what are you funding here? And every year we get more requests for capital improvements. So we just want to make sure that, everybody's aligned on and doing their part.
Or the sheriff?
Right, right.
That drug money fund that he has, that couldn't that be used for supplements or
Possibly.
something to
Yeah,
that? All right,
that's
let
right.
me ask you, in your tenure, you've already, in your 4 years, I think, at least once you've discussed the possibility of a sales tax increase. Where are you on that? And do you see that we talked about a tax shift. We didn't really get around to the question of how do you make up for the loss of the um, homestead revenue. So, how would you make up for that loss? And is the half-cent sales tax part of that mix?
So, we know that making up for the loss is going to take those difficult conversations, looking at duplicative expenses, and reducing growth in the employee pool, eliminating us unnecessary items. We need to look at vacant positions. Do we really need to fill them back? Consulting contracts, do we need so many of them? We'd have to delay non-essential capital programs and purchases. Um, that's that's just the work that has to be done, and we'd have to do some work with municipalities and other governments to have conversations like what we were just talking about with the school board. So that's the work that would have to be done if the amendment is passed. Um, and then we're going to have to work really, really hard at broadening the tax base and looking at how do we get commercial in here? How do we become more attractive? We do some work in it, we just don't do enough. Mainly the year gets by us. We have so many issues coming at it. It hasn't, it needs to be done and it needs to be done with all the municipalities as well. So broadening the tax base to get the relief from other revenue streams. So that's important. I think you asked about the half penny. Are we?
Yes. Are
Okay.
you? Yes. I mean, straight
No,
out, are you in favor of
no,
an increase?
I've never supported the half penny. I've been open, upfront, and honest. It's been a question probably for every level of government in this county, every election season for the last 12 years. That half penny has been kicked around for all sorts of reasons. The last time it was brought to our board, I was upfront with the no. Um, and I just continue to sit on that. I think that's the right thing. I think until we see all governments in our county and around the state prioritizing essential services, um, you know, and really not spending where we don't think they should spend, then I don't know that we necessarily should be digging around for more revenue. like that. So the problem when it was brought up to us was it was specifically being brought up for the beach. Now, the half penny that is left as an option for this county
Mhm.
is for infrastructure, the way it was written at the state level. It cannot be codified specifically to the beach. Okay, so there were so many ways they were splitting this half penny. The city of Palm Coast, city of Bunnell was not sure if they were going to give their portion or not. The city of Flagler was willing to, Flagler Beach, willing to give their portion. Beverly Beach, of course. Palm Coast, it was 50%, it was 80%. They didn't have a consensus. They had two on a consensus, but not three. Um, it it got so confusing, and it really beach funding relied heavily on getting the lion's share of Palm Coast uh, half penny. Then at that point, let's say Palm Coast residents decide, yes, I want to give the lion's share of our last half penny that could go to our roads and our swales and our
Mhm.
flooding issues to the beach. We're willing to give up 80% of that because I don't even know if the residents even knew that was really out there yet. Even if Palm Coast decided to share it, it comes over to the county, right? But there's no codifying that it's going to the beach, meaning that if tomorrow our board changes over and there are three new people and they find that the most important thing to this county is cleaning the ditches, along whatever corridor, they can immediately say, you know what? I don't want to waste any more money on the beach. I don't feel confident about the beach, or the beach is too much. Suddenly, what everybody worked so hard to put together for that half penny is now being redirected somewhere else because it could never, ever be codified for the beach. So it's just another mechanism of revenue. And when I came on that board, it was pushed for roads. Commissioner passed the half penny for roads. Then suddenly was Commissioner passed the half penny for beaches. Before I was running for office, it was commissioners pass it for public safety. Remember? It was always like, we just want the half penny. And so when you ask me,
We're
Leann,
talking about the speculative halfpenny that could pass, or that would not the one on the books,
and
because the one on the books was actually codified specifically for certain needs, capital needs, including, for instance, the jail, and then other
that
capital needs since the operation center for the sheriff, um, and that sort of projects, right? It
and
was
and the board didn't pass it then, and Palm Coast didn't support it then, if you
no,
remember.
no. I'm saying that halfpenny did the board did pass it in 2012. Um,
Oh no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in 2020, if you recall.
Oh, the supplement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right. No, I understand. That's right. The
Yeah.
supplement has not passed, but I
Right.
mean the previous one, the halfpenny that is in existence now has been codified and specified for this is how you spend this money. So you could do the same with if you were to add another halfpenny, you would do the same with that.
You cannot, so this is what we were told. You can't codify it for the beach. What you
I
can do
see.
is I make it a priority for its infrastructure.
Mm.
But what I'm telling you is that anytime anybody could come along on our board and say infrastructure today means this. The people that were coming in front of us talking to us about the beach um, or had a million reasons for or against the half penny. The problem, and I'm sure we're going to get into it in a minute, we can talk about it then, is the half penny is just a small portion of that actual equation. And I don't think we had support from Palm Coast to take 80%. And I think at 50%, the numbers weren't going to work again, even if they did 50%. So it just, you can't just continue to it will not end up being enough. It's never enough. And I think that's the problem. Until all these boards do the work that they need to do to get lean and mean, am I going to look at a half penny? No, I'm not. I'm not going to look at a half penny. I'm not going to do it. So, but I was honest, open, and upfront from day one on the half penny, and other commissioners have known that. And I even said in the first meeting where it was brought up for the beach, I don't support the half penny, but I am wholly understanding if you want to talk about it and come to that conclusion. And there is a mechanism to put that out on the ballot for the residents to vote for as well. So,
Yeah,
but they
it
never came
it
to
was
that.
done previously. That's
Yeah.
right. So we've kind of talked about this already, but do you take Blaise Ingoglia's claim at face value that you have wasted $59 million over the last 5 years? And that,
I,
that falls
yeah.
on you.
Yeah, I don't, well, it falls on Joe Mullins and it falls on me, right? Because those are both their years. I don't take it at face value. I take it seriously. But when I look back at the state calculation, when we're able to actually look at it, and unfortunately, as you brought up earlier, we haven't been able to look at whatever they've generated. They won't answer a public record request. But they've never identified fraudulent purchases, waste, the term waste. They've not come back to us with any unnecessary programs. They haven't said, hey, you need to eliminate these specific expenditures. So when I look at it and afterwards, when he left our county, um, and I'm like, well, you didn't factor into all the carry forward reserves that we did. We were nearly fiscally constrained, almost a bankrupt county if you go back. We now have very healthy reserves, reserves we need to do capital projects, reserves we need to put out for matches for grants, reserves we need to put out to get back money from the state. We just didn't have it. We went from, I think, 7 to 42 million in reserves during that time. So that's where a bulk of this money went um, into our reserves. We paid off very old debt. This county was notorious for taking out debt. So we paid off that. We refinanced a lot of debt to get lower interest rates. We paid for constitutional officers, our public safety state mandates that they had on increasing what we had to pay for state mandates. We brought 911 over from the sheriff's office to the county. So like more than 80% of the reported staffing increase was public safety positions. So am I going to mislead taxpayers by calling like deputies and firefighters waste because we increased those roles? No, I'm not. So I find the target misleading. I get the concept though, that the state, that's what we were talking about earlier. I get what they're saying. You know, we can't continue to grow at this pace. You cannot grow taxes at this level. So whatever it is you need to do to get your alignment, maybe you do less, you don't do certain projects, whatever it is, you need to get there. You can't keep going at this point, or we're going to have people like the state come down with their mandates to stop the spending like they're trying to do. So I get the concept. I take it seriously. I don't take that claim at face value when I look at the numbers. And we've started an entire um, website page to show people the numbers.
Mhm. You've talked about consolidation, but can you be a little bit more specific about what you would consolidate between municipalities and the county, if
Um,
you think?
Well, I'm going to go back to what everybody talks about when they talk about consolidation, right? Why does there municipalities with police departments? Why is there fire in different municipalities? Does every municipality need communications? Can permitting be consolidated? Can administrative services be consolidated? Can park and rec be consolidated? So those are all areas I think we consider. Now, would I just consolidate to consolidate? No, I think you have to have some very detailed financial analysis there to show that it would prove a cost saving overall to the residents, improve efficiency, things like that. So yeah, you can have conversations with about just about everything in terms of consolidation.
How would those get started? Would you have joint meetings? Would you, where is the initiative to even start the conversation? It's
That's
invisible right
that's
now.
exactly where the problem lies, right? Where's the initiative to sit down and go, you know what? Um, it seems to me that we're only going to get that initiative to sit down and have tough conversations if they're taking revenue from us, right? People don't seem to want to have the conversation in other municipalities. I get it. People like knowing that they have their own fire and rescue. I don't think most people know in the county that this county is required to provide fire and police. You already get that service from our sheriff's department. But those municipalities need to, if they're wanting to free up their general funds, so they can get more projects done and not raise taxes, then we need to have that conversation. Can the county do it for less money? can the county do it with what we have now? It has to make sense though, or else we can't do it. I mean, if we're going to bring those over and the costs are exponentially higher, obviously it may not be in the best consideration of the resident. So, but you can't get these folks to have this conversation for a million different little reasons, and they need to have the conversations.
So the environmentally sensitive lands program, it's coming up for renewal during the next term. It's at 12.5 cents per $1,000 in taxable money. So it's a very small amount that's being charged. About
$30 a
yeah,
year.
$30 a year for a $300,000 house with a homestead
Yeah.
exemption. That's just right.
Mhm.
Now, are you supportive of putting the renewal on the ballot? I take it you are. I mean, it's,
Yes.
but Kim Carney, the commissioner, has talks about changing the mission of ESL to potentially include different kind of things where it could be spent, like the beach. She has raised even the possibility that we don't really need more lands to protect, but we can have other things that we can protect. Where are you on that?
Yeah, I completely support it. I think the county supports it. I wouldn't just put that on Commissioner Carney. We've had those conversations. Can this program be extended to include the beach, right? Is the beach something that we need to, conserve and protect? If so, here's a revenue stream that we could probably see and put out. For the public to vote on. So I think it could be looked at. I definitely support it going back on. Here's what's happening with conservation land and purchase. The problem we're running into is the land that needs to be conserved, protected, that we really would love to see shelved away and not developed is getting very expensive. And when I say, well, it's getting to where this program by itself doesn't necessarily generate enough funds to purchase meaningful lands yearly. When we were able to go to Tallahassee and get, close to $13 million, that helped greatly because they were very in tune with protecting the wildlife corridor. But those funds aren't going to come forever from them. So what has been happening is the pieces that we're very much interested in because we want to see them conserved, like Lake Distant, we're not getting those because obviously those properties have potential developer rights with them and they can go for a lot more money. And so a lot of those landowners don't want to sell it unless it's for more money. And honestly, our program only allows us to pay appraised value. So a lot of the land that needs to be conserved is just becoming unattainable for our program.
Would you be willing to raise the amount from 12.5 cents to, 20 cents, 25 cents?
Yes, yes.
You'll be willing to raise that amount, the
Yeah.
levy.
Well, remember, it has to be a ballot initiative.
Mhm.
So, yes, absolutely. I don't foresee our residents like clean living. They obviously are not supportive of industry that's not clean, things like that. They love our conservation program. I definitely could see people willing to pay more to see more land conserved. But we should have those discussions too about like, is this a possibility of a fund that could also protect the beach or acquire beach lands, and things like
So
that?
let me ask you this, though. Let's assume that the amendment passes. How does and I have this levy on my tax bill. Is the first $250,000 protected for that levy? In other words, I don't pay that levy up until I'm beyond the 250,000, or how does that work?
We don't know yet. So I did ask that, so I don't have an answer on it yet. So we don't know.
So it
We
could
don't
potentially affect things like this.
we
Uh,
don't I'm not sure that it would. I think this would stand alone, but I would have to get more information. I think this would stand alone and still contain. Um,
Well,
I'm
Michael
wondering,
Martin has said, he's the chair of the
it would
mosquito
impact that.
control board. He appeared before, I think, your board and the city council, and he said, if this passes,
Right.
our revenue is devastated, and we can't do what we've been doing. We can't spray for mosquitoes.
It's possible that something like this program, and I don't know this, so we're just having hypotheticals, but
Yeah.
it's possible this program could be turned into something like an MSBU or TU. We can show benefit to it. So I think it's going to be one of those that has to be where, look, I don't, everyone's going to be thrown in a tizzy. I think that's the whole purpose of the amendment is really to make people within the government start questioning their decisions and how do we operate,
So
you know.
you're okay with the state passing an amendment that makes us lab rats?
I no, I think that I think the intention was completely different than what we got. I'm going to be honest with you. I think some people were at the state level just did not do the work necessary. They talked about it for what, 2 years? But at the end of the day, they didn't do the work necessary to make that a thoughtful bill, a thoughtful amendment. But I do see some movement in the courts that if they get to take it back to the attorney general and rewrite it, it could become a thoughtful bill, a thoughtful amendment again.
I
So,
think the sheriff was closer to the truth when he said that they talked about it for a couple of days and passed
no,
it
no, no.
in a special
I
session.
think the obviously Governor DeSantis's idea was out there for a while, but I don't think that the Senate delivered a quality
Right.
amendment. I do believe that there might be an opportunity to write it to quality standard. And that's why I said I think I'm a yes if on it. They do some things to protect the smaller counties and counties like us.
So in other words, you're still leaving the door open to voting against it by the time it hits the ballot.
That's right. We don't know what it says yet. We don't know. We know what they wrote,
Okay.
but there are some very strong, adamant lawsuits that would say it stays on the ballot, but it goes to the Attorney General to be rewritten as it should be intended to do this, that, and the other. And there's some really good questions on it that are like, I don't think you can exempt people who from getting the homestead exemption that until they've been here 5 years. I'm not even sure. I
Is
think
that
that's
legal?
being challenged. I think it's being challenged.
Yeah.
So
So,
I support the concept of it. I think homestead exemption is important. I'm looking for a couple different things. I'm smart enough to know there'll be a tax shift for sure. So I'm waiting to see exactly what the state plans to do because they haven't talked about what are you doing with sales tax, you know? We're all consumers, so don't pretend like consumption taxes you can control, right? You can't control what you buy. You can control it to some extent, but when you need a new washing machine, you need a new washing machine. You're going to pay taxes. So, so I'm curious to see what they're going to do there. So,
so let's talk about the beach management and
mm,
the fact that Flagler County remains the only county without a beach management plan.
mm,
Um, where are you on first? Is it possible to continue without a beach management plan? And if not, as I assume you would agree that it's not possible to continue without a plan, how are you going to get to the point where you can fund one, especially with the amendment looming?
okay, so we do have an adopted beach management plan that was voted on in October, I think, 24. So there is a beach management plan. It's the funding that is a discussion. The funding part will always be there as a discussion, and let me explain that specifically. We're seeing in Reach 2, right? We're in the process of bidding out. We just bid it out for Reach 2.
By
Reach
which you mean a segment of beach north of the pier
Right. We have Reach
to
1, which is
Beverly,
Flagler Beach,
right?
and they have their Army
Reach-
Corps project.
And
Um,
Reach 2 goes to about Beverly Beach, right?
right.
To
Reach 2 is kind of like Varn Park, Beverly
right.
Beach, Painters Hill. Okay. Um, that we put that out for bid. And it came back. We had money from the state. We had money set aside from our coffers. It came back and the bids were higher than what we had set aside and what we had from the state. So it came back, I think, at 39 million was the bid, and we had about 35. So immediately, what happens to that project? Well, the lowest bid was 39. I mean, the higher bids were 50, 60 million just to do 5 miles of beach. And this is, not a one and done thing. It's, has to be
Right.
consistently looked at, done every several years. I think in Matthew, it was way less. So these costs just keep going up with the beach, with the bids that are coming in. So you look at that bid and it comes in at 35 million or 39 million, you've only got 35. Immediately, you've got to have less sand, right? How do we drive the price down so we can continue to do it? We're going to have to take on less sand. Okay. So the project, obviously, the more sand is beneficial to the project. Now we're at less sand.
Hmm.
Then we have easements outstanding. And if you're watching this and you haven't signed an easement, the easements are super critical to this entire thing going off
You
well.
have many easements outstanding,
15,
which
15.
makes the project impossible to do regardless, whether you have the money and the sand or not.
Correct. Correct. So we're like, there's 15. And if you've seen it, when we have to work around someone who's not given an easement, they essentially create this wall and then this just goes around you of
Hmm.
dirt. And then you have basically a pool in front of you where the water comes in because you didn't get sand in that area. No work was done in your area. That actually becomes a liability too for the county for people who are out there
Mhm.
playing on the beach, get hurt near there. And then having 15 of those in a 5 mile stretch weakens the project significantly. I'm not even sure.
Having one or two weakens it significantly. We learned that from when Flagler Beach was doing its project. That's why it was so critical to even get the one. You spent a year and a half, 2 years just to get the one easement, and you went to court over it.
Right. I
So
know. So 15, and these are not 15 that are going to show up and give it to us tomorrow. I don't care what they say. I've seen the list. People are in probate, divorce, nowhere to be found at all. So they've been trying for years to get these folks. Kudos to Commissioner Carney, who got two of them in the last several weeks by making phone calls. But 15's a big pill to swallow. Then if we could still swallow that pill, less sand, less easements, we come down to Beverly Beach, who lost a seawall and who cannot get it built back in time for this project. So they would not be able to be complete in time to enjoy the benefit of the project because there won't be a wall there. And we need the wall back before we can do the sand replacement. So there's a project that has been in the making for several years, right? We know that Reach One Flagler Beach has a good, viable project with Army Corps. They're in monitoring phase, maintenance and monitoring. So they need to be dealt with in terms of funding when they come up again. But now we're trying to do Reach Two construction. It's almost impossible to do with those kinds of issues. If we even get past all those issues, the grants that we received from the state require us to pay for the project up front and then we will be reimbursed.
mm,
That's where that having the reserves for things like this are so necessary to us. Um, we would almost have to expend almost all of our reserves out,
mm.
wait for this project to be completed, signed off, for the state to send it back. That's that's tricky. That's can be dangerous, you know. You
But the way
don't
things stand today, it sounds like that project, that reach, is not going to happen because it can't happen with all those easements, and you don't have the money, and you haven't yet gotten to the point of deciding how.
we have yeah we have we have some of the money for this project, but here's the thing. So you're absolutely right. Like even put the money aside, we need the easements in that wall to be done, right? For
Yeah,
this to be a
yeah.
successful project. And time is not on our side with the state grants. So we have these grants,
Do you
but
lose the money at some point?
we would lose the funding. So we're going to be having those conversations in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting to see what the go no go is on it. But absolutely, we're going to have those conversations. And so when the public's like, "Oh, it's all over a half penny," it's not over just a half penny. It's over easements. It's over cost of the bid coming in. It's over our seawalls ready to go. Then it's over, do we have enough money in reserves to put out, still operate as a county and wait to receive back? Because as we know with grants, we can wait a while for the check to come back,
Hmm.
right? And that our budget group has said, commissioners, we may have to take out tax anticipation notes, a loan to pay payroll when we expend all of the reserves for this beach. That's a risky place to be in. No county should ever be in that position. But that's the breaks. The beach is a very expensive project. It is expensive in perpetuity. Is it necessary? Yeah, you said the do nothing's not an option. That is absolutely true. But when we get into Reach 3 and Reach 4, marine land, hammock dunes, they don't have permittable projects. They have hard bottom. rocking. They may never have permittable projects. We may only be doing dune restoration
Mhm.
there. We may not be able to actually do any kind of, beach
Renourishment.
expansion and renourishment. So when we looked at that, when we talked about, well, everything fell apart or whatever, we
Mm.
have a beach management plan. It's broken into 4 reaches. The state was asking specifically, it helps us with grants to have specific dedicated funding for the beach. It doesn't have to be fully funded for the project. They have to know that you can turn on a spigot and get money directly for the beach. One of the only things they consider dedicated funding is an MSBU and
Mm.
tourism funds. And a lot of counties around the state of Florida, that's how they get their beaches done, right? They have an infinite amount of tourism. They have MSBUs, St. Johns County, all of them have MSBUs running. So the board passed an MSBU. I said no to it because we did not have a study back yet. So
Mm.
how to pass an MSBU when not knowing if you're in the zone that should be taxed appropriately.
But that's
So
a possibility.
an MSBU is a possibility. And the whole point of the MSBU was specifically to go to the state and go, we have an MSBU over Reach 3 that we can receive funding from. And they'll say, okay, so you have dedicated funding for Reach 3? Yes, sir, we do. But we know as a county, we can show them we have dedicated funding. That helps us get the funding from the grant. We don't have to use that to fund the whole thing. We can go back to our existing sales tax. We can go to the tourism pennies that are allocated for beach. We can go to ad valorem.
Mm.
We can go to all those things. So we know we have places we can pull money from besides an MSBU. Should the people that live on the beach pay 100%? No. We agree that everybody uses the beach for the most part, or a large majority. In the beach, also, even if you don't use it, by the way, the beach has jobs, infrastructure, brings tourists, which help pay for bills around here. So the beach is critical, and it's also the first line of defense when the storms come in for everybody. So we believe the beach, long term, everyone should be paying a portion of it. So, but when we saw the project, it was taking into account Reach 3, Reach 4, all of these costs. But if you don't have a permittable project in Reach 3 or Reach 4, you may not necessarily need to take into consideration those very expensive costs. Because if I can't get the permit, I can't do the project. And it's
You can't protect the beach.
no sense in, right, but that's a hard rock bottom, and there's nothing I can do to get around the DEP or the state, right? So I can put a dune back, but a dune is a whole lot less than the other.
Yeah.
So so what numbers are we really working with? If we know, and two, if we're designated critical or critically eroded, we can actually obtain more funding, which we didn't have that information when we were looking at it to fund last year. So it is always going to be assessed like this
Mm.
from here to forever. You cannot stick a half penny on this and say solved, problem solved. You're never going to do that for this project.
Yeah.
The costs are always going to go up. There's always going to be all these variables to it, easements, permits, seawalls. Let's talk about the portion that is straight A1A. What is the FDOT doing in terms of funding, helping us fund it to protect the road? Um, so it is like a moving target. So, you know, I hate to say it like that, but it just is. It's a moving target. It's going to go up in cost every year. And we're always going to be having conversations about how to fund it, regardless, until there's so much revenue here, commercial wise, until there's so much revenue, tourism wise. This will always be a lingering conversation. You're not going to be able to slap a half penny on it and call it done. So
The
that's,
sheriff's budget.
yeah.
The sheriff's budget and fire rescue, they've both increased considerably. They've outpaced inflation. They've outpaced the population increase by several 87% increase for the sheriff as opposed to 22% increase for population over the last 5 years, for example. Fire rescue and emergency management combined have increased 80% over the last 5 years. How is this defensible and how is it sustainable?
Well, defensible, first of all, public safety is a core responsibility of county government. So, right there, and I'm not just talking about the sheriff, I'm talking about fire, rescue, emergency management. We should put them in there, 911 operators. Just that is your core service. That is your responsibility to fund. But when we talk about sustain, how are we going to sustain it? They don't just come to us in a vapor and say, I need this money. Some constitutionals have done that and not defended why they need it. Um, they're reporting around it, but there's all these measures in place to consider whether or not that budget needs to be increased. We have response times, call volume. Call volume is a big driver of it. Just because crime rates down here doesn't mean that we don't get an large amount of 911 calls. People are calling because their cat's in a tree. People are calling for wellness checks. I rear-ended somebody. The more our population goes up, the more the call volume goes up. The more the world's in crisis, the call volume goes up. Population distribution, people are moving west. We need more deputies out west. Um, Emergency medical demand, just depending on your situation, where you get more calls, COVID, whatever. These are all taken into consideration. Replacing equipment, replacing training equipment, doing disaster preparedness training. Um, it can be overfunded, but when they can provide us the data to show us that they need this to continue to support, then yeah, that's core responsibility of the county government. Yes, that's what I'm supposed to fund first. The state agrees that's what we're supposed to fund first. So
Does it
we,
make sense anymore when we have those discussions to send the same personnel, like a $150,000 cop and uh,
Mhm.
a $500,000 fire engine and its equipment to a cat rescue as opposed to sending a COP, a
No,
volunteer, to do the same job for, $150?
I just had this question the other day. Someone said, "Why does the fire department roll out with the EMS?" And it's a great question. And why is that happening? So I expect our emergency leaders to have those conversations and do the work necessary to say, are we, I mean, they're the departments too. They're not, let me make this abundantly clear. I know the state tells me to prioritize that. It is a core responsibility. I agree. I think that's what makes Flagler one of the most attractive counties. It's beautiful and it's incredibly safe. And I can call, I've had it myself. My husband went through cancer. I can call and EMS is here in 5 minutes. That's amazing. And I don't want that to change. And that's exactly where I want my funding to go. But I still expect those departments, particularly in times like where we're at now, where we're having to talk about, beach, roads, all these discussions. I expect them to do their homework and to tell me, I'm presenting you a budget, commissioner, that I have ensured that I am not overfunding these are real needs. These are not nice to haves, and I am not overfunding these our departments, that this is what I need to get by. So I think we got to get a little stronger with that as a board. And we need to make it abundantly clear to fire, rescue, police. I love you. I want to fund you. Please ensure that you're doing the best you can do here to ensure that we're not overfunding you. Because we take it on their word and their data that they need these items and they need these positions. And so if they can find efficiency, it's much appreciated, because, everybody loves them. We want to see them supported, but we also need to make sure that they're doing exactly what's necessary to keep the budget in line. So,
So the county airport, now this is a question that has a lot to do with your opponent, Anna Wood. She's very concerned about the county airport. So here's your chance to address this. It's an economic asset, there's no question. Nobody's going to argue that. It's also a noisy place, and it may be producing some pollution, as some of the neighbors say. So um, what would you propose that the county do if you even can do anything? Because the argument from Roy Seeger, the county airport director, has been, well, our powers are limited in how much we can control the activity at the airport, including the flight schools, right?
yeah.
Because if you were to say to the flight schools, well, we're going to limit you, or we're going to accept this one, but not that one, you lose federal grants, you lose state grants, and so on. Is that correct?
That's correct. So basically everything, I think it's 600 feet above is controlled by the FAA. It's not controlled by the county. The airport is and has been a public airport for, I don't know, since World War II, somewhere in there. It has flight schools. It has two flight schools there currently. They built their buildings. They lease on a 30-year lease from there. Um, so we have gone out, we have a voluntary noise abatement procedure. We asked them, please, could you kindly not fly on Sundays? Could you not do touch and go practice over houses? All of those things have been asked of them, but again, it's voluntary. The FAA has sent us numerous letters telling us that it is not within our jurisdiction to control air traffic patterns. So we are
Then
very
you can't tell the schools, you can't compel the schools, mandate the schools to operate only within certain hours.
That's correct.
You cannot do that.
You cannot do that. Um, it's federally controlled, regulated airspace, you know?
Airspace, yes, but what I
Yeah.
mean is in the lease, when you lease out to a school, you can't
We,
say the lease
yeah,
terms are such.
it's voluntary. It's completely voluntary. It remains such, and the FAA requires it. And so when we look at the airport, when I came on, this was a big issue for some people in that area. Some people said, I hear them, they're over all day. I didn't know I moved next to an airport. What can you do? And unfortunately, the city of Palm Coast has allowed development completely around the airport. The development came after the airport. And a lot of people did not realize they were moving near an airport. Um, we have two flight schools. We can show that those flight schools are not necessarily the issue with the flying and the noise. We have flights coming in from all over, from Embry-Riddle in Daytona, Leann. So we have planes from all walks of life up above us. The airport is public. It has taken over many years grants from the FDOT, grants from the FAA to build out the airport. We see it as an economic driver out there. And so we've taken these grants, and part of that is ensuring that we follow FAA guidelines and FDOT guidelines in terms of how the airspace is regulated. We can ask them, but we cannot enforce it. And that seems to be a problem, not just in Flagler County, but at many airports across the state. I've been reading quite a bit about it, have for years. We just have to encourage pilots to use less disruptive operating practices, but we have numerous letters which have been sent to the people who have been upset about it from the FAA itself to telling us that we have no control or jurisdiction for it.
So bottom line, we can't really change the way things are today.
No, we can't. And here's the thing. It would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to unwind and probably many costly lawsuits on top of that. We have lease agreements with the operators, not just the flight schools, but there are other flights out there. Obviously, we have hangars everywhere. Um, they have lease agreements. They have built their buildings on the property. We would have to probably refund the FDOT, the FAA. I don't even know what it would take. We've had, hypothetical discussions. It would be unrealistic and a large tax burden to the taxpayers to try to even unwind the airport. It is a public airport. I think you're not allowed to prohibit lawful flight, and we aren't allowed to impose unreasonable restrictions. And that's very clear from the FAA. And that's not just the county saying that. I mean, we've all come in and questioned it, especially as new commissioners, what can be done, can be done. They're doing the airport master plan right now. They have people within the air industry on that board trying to figure out creative ways to try to regulate some of that. Can't be done. The city of Palm Coast injected themselves into it. They were very adamant about trying to help the residents around that area that were hearing the planes or whatever. They hit the same wall. Their legal also got involved. They hit the same wall we did with the FAA. So
Yeah.
it can be done. I think it would be done. It just can't at this point.
So the last question is about your legal past, if you've ever been charged with a felony, a misdemeanor anywhere in the country or here, other than a speeding ticket or faced a civil action, other than a divorce, but including bankruptcies. Um, Anything to that effect?
No bankruptcies, no divorces. I'm a widow, and I had a speeding ticket that was a suspended license, and that was when I was, I don't know, 20 years old, just many years ago. That was it.
And any civil actions that you've had to face?
No,
No
but I
civil
can
actions.
go.
And in
And
your profession? No?
no,
I'm sorry, but okay.
no disciplinary action. They're board.
In your yeah, in your professional life, no demotions.
I don't think I would be allowed to be where I'm at and have faced any of this. So no,
Very good. Well, that brings you to the end of all the questions. So I appreciate very much the time you took and the details that you provided.
that was a lot. I
It was,
appreciate it though. It was a
it
good
was, it was
conversation. It kind of helps reframe my thought on everything, to go through it. We didn't even touch on the point, but the cat's the best part of this conversation.
the
So
cat.
yeah, so if you could put
Yes.
a little sign there that says vote Leann on the cat, that'd be great.
Right. Johan. Okay. Well, in any case, thank you very much, Miss Pennington, and best of luck in the weeks ahead, and we'll talk soon again.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.